For over 6 decades, Connie Francis has been a cherished name in American music, a voice that transcended genres, generations, and borders. As one of the most successful female pop singers of the 20th century, she helped define an era. Yet her name continues to be conspicuously absent from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's a baffling omission, one that becomes harder to justify with each passing year. Born Concetta Rosa Maria Francanero in Newark, New Jersey, Connie Francis burst onto the scene at a time when the music industry was dominated by men. As a young Italian-American woman, she broke through cultural and industry barriers, becoming the first female pop star to achieve international fame in the rock and roll era. Her breakout hit, Who's Sorry Now?, in 1958 catapulted her to stardom. From there, she delivered a stunning run of chart toppers, including Where the Boys Are, Stupid Cupid, Lipstick on Your Collar, and Everybody's Somebody's Fool. These weren't just catchy tunes, they were the soundtrack of a generation. Her voice was everywhere. Jukeboxes, radios, movies, and TV shows. Connie wasn't just popular, she was revolutionary. She became one of the first American artists to record albums in multiple languages, including Italian, German, Spanish, and Hebrew, connecting with audiences worldwide long before the idea of global pop stars existed. Her cultural contributions as an Italian-American icon also cannot be overlooked. In an era when ethnic minorities were often sidelined in mainstream media, Francis proudly embraced her roots. She became a beacon of pride for the Italian-American community, especially for immigrant families who saw in her both tradition and transformation. Many artists who came after her, both male and female, owe a debt to Connie Francis. She helped pave the way for women in pop and rock long before it became commonplace. Her music influenced legends like Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, Cyndi Lauper, and even Madonna. And yet, while so many of her peers and protégés have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Francis remains on the outside looking in. Her exclusion is particularly striking given the Hall of Fame's mission to honor those who have made lasting contributions to the development of rock and roll. Connie Francis did exactly that. She defined the early pop rock sound, helped normalize women in the mainstream spotlight, and introduced American rock and roll to the world. Connie Francis's legacy is not solely defined by her chart-topping hits or her unmistakable voice. It is equally shaped by her unimaginable personal battles and her relentless will to survive. While the public often sees her as the glamorous pop icon of the late 1950s and early 60s, behind the scenes was a woman who faced one heartbreaking trial after another and still found the strength to sing through the pain. Her resilience adds a depth to her story that goes far beyond music. It speaks to the very heart of perseverance and the enduring power of the human spirit. At the height of her fame, Connie Francis was living every artist's dream. She had become the most successful female singer of her generation. But just as quickly as she rose, life began to test her in ways few could imagine. One of the darkest chapters of her life came in 1974. After a performance in Westbury, New York, Connie was staying at a hotel when she was brutally assaulted in her room. The traumatic attack shook her to her core. Not only did it lead to severe emotional trauma and a prolonged legal battle, but it also silenced her voice, both literally and figuratively. She withdrew from public life, spiraling into a long and painful period of depression and isolation. But Connie Francis refused to let the attack define her. She became a fierce advocate for victim rights, using her platform to raise awareness about sexual assault at a time when the topic was still taboo. She pushed for better security at hotels and testified before Congress, helping to bring legislative changes that protected guests' rights across the United States. Francis's emotional journey did not end there. She openly struggled with bipolar disorder, enduring years of instability that led to several stints in psychiatric facilities. Her honesty about her diagnosis and her time in mental health institutions was groundbreaking. In an era when mental illness was often cloaked in shame, Connie brought the topic into the light, speaking publicly about her experiences in interviews and her 1984 autobiography, Who's Sorry Now? She did not present herself as a victim. She presented herself as a survivor. Her bravery in facing mental illness inspired countless fans, particularly women who had suffered in silence. She reminded people that strength doesn't always look like perfection. Sometimes it looks like simply refusing to give up. As if her personal suffering weren't enough, Connie also endured devastating family losses. One of the most heartbreaking was the murder of her brother George Francanero, Jr. in a mafia-related shooting in 1981. George was more than just family. He was her manager, her closest confidant, and one of her greatest champions. His death left a deep void in her life and career. Despite the pain, Connie once again found a way to continue. She returned to the stage, rebuilt her life piece by piece, and connected with audiences who admired her not only for her voice, but for her ability to keep going when everything told her to stop. Connie Francis's career was marked by more comebacks than most could imagine. Every time the world thought it had heard the last of her, she found a way to return. In the 1980s and 1990s, she began performing again, touring in the U.S. and internationally. Her fans, some of whom had followed her since the 1950s, welcomed her back with open arms. Even into her 70s, Connie continued to take the stage, performing in places like Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and her beloved Florida. She released new music and remastered old classics, never abandoning the love affair she had with singing. Her voice may have changed over the years, but her soul never wavered. The world often celebrates artists for their talent, but in Connie Francis's case, it's her tenacity that elevates her to legendary status. Her story is not just about stardom, it's about survival. Few artists have been through the level of trauma, personal loss, and professional challenges that she faced. Even fewer have come back from it with grace, dignity, and a renewed sense of purpose. In many ways, her journey reflects the experiences of millions of women who suffer, fall, get back up, and keep going. Connie gave them a voice, not just through her music, but through her story. Her legacy is a powerful reminder that behind the glamour of fame are real people, living real lives, with real pain and real courage. She used her platform to raise awareness on important issues like sexual assault, mental health, and victims' rights. She turned her pain into activism and her silence into advocacy. That is the mark of someone who is more than just a singer. Connie Francis is not just a relic of a bygone musical era. She is a woman who shaped popular music and, through unimaginable hardship, showed the world what it means to survive. Her strength, resilience, and authenticity have touched hearts for generations and continue to inspire. She is more than a chart topper, more than a pop icon. She is a warrior in sequins, a voice that rose above trauma and refused to be silenced. That, perhaps more than anything, is why she belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not just because she sang the hits, but because she lived them. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has come a long way since its inception. Over the past few decades, it has worked to become more inclusive, broadening its scope beyond traditional rock bands to include artists from soul, R&B, hip-hop, pop, and beyond. It has slowly but surely begun to correct the historical underrepresentation of women, and it has honored artists whose influence transcended commercial success or conventional genres. Yet, despite this progress, Connie Francis remains one of the most glaring omissions in the Hall's history. That omission isn't just a mistake, it's a historic wrong that must be made right. Connie Francis wasn't simply a singer who thrived in the early days of rock and roll. She helped define the very sound and culture of the era. At a time when the music industry was largely male-dominated and conservative in its views on what a woman could or should do, Connie broke barriers. She was the first woman to reach #1 on the Billboard pop chart, with her smash hit Everybody's Somebody's Fool. She followed it with a string of chart-topping singles, proving that her success wasn't a fluke, it was a force. Songs like Who's Sorry Now? Lipstick on Your Collar, Where the Boys Are, and Stupid Cupid not only topped charts, but also became cultural anthems. These tracks helped establish the teen pop genre and laid the groundwork for future female stars to follow. Her influence touched every corner of popular music. She was among the first American artists to embrace a global audience, recording and performing in more than a dozen languages. She proved that music could cross both geographic and cultural boundaries long before it became a marketing strategy. By continuing to overlook Connie Francis, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame fails to acknowledge the foundational role women played in shaping the music industry. Connie wasn't a footnote in music history. She was a cornerstone. Her impact is not just about statistics or hit records, though she had plenty. It's about the symbolism and significance of her achievements. Her very presence on the stage in the 1950s and 60s challenged norms. She dared to be bold, vulnerable, romantic, and unapologetically feminine in a time when female artists were expected to stay in the background. Her voice gave power to teenage girls, her image became a role model for young dreamers, and her persistence through personal tragedy set a precedent for what it meant to be a survivor in the spotlight. Leaving her out of the Hall of Fame is not only a snub, it sends a message that the achievements of early female pioneers are somehow less worthy of enshrinement than their male counterparts. That message is not only false, it is damaging to the integrity of the hall itself. Connie Francis's influence can be heard in the music of countless artists who followed. From the vocal styling of Linda Ronstadt, the charisma of Madonna, the nostalgic teen pop sound of Debbie Gibson, and even the international crossover careers of modern stars like Celine Dion and Shakira, the fingerprints of Connie's legacy are evident. Moreover, her role as a trailblazer for women in the music business paved the way for generations of female performers to demand equal billing, better contracts, and a place at the executive table. Connie's career taught the world that women weren't just capable of singing a love song. They were capable of owning the stage, the studio, and their careers. Inducting Connie Francis into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame wouldn't just be an honor, it would be a restoration of history. It would validate the impact of women who helped build the very foundation of American pop and rock music. It would show young artists, especially women and ethnic minorities, that their contributions are not only valuable but remembered and respected. For Italian Americans, in particular, her recognition would be a profound moment. Connie Francis was one of the first major artists of Italian descent to gain massive success in mainstream American music. She proudly celebrated her heritage in song and spirit, and she became a cultural touchstone for millions of immigrant families who saw their own stories reflected in her journey. Her induction would also be a nod to the rich, often under-recognized contribution of ethnic communities to American music. At a time when the music industry is finally beginning to reckon with its history of exclusion, inducting Connie Francis is more than overdue. It's essential. It's about preserving the truth of rock and roll history, which includes not only the loud guitars and rebellious lyrics, but also the soaring ballads, heartfelt love songs, and voices that captured the emotional heartbeat of a generation. Connie Francis belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just because she was there at the beginning, not just because she sold millions of records, not just because she inspired decades of artists, but because she changed the world with her voice and refused to be silenced. It's time to honor her. It's time to correct the record. It's time to welcome Connie Francis home.